Looking back, it's hard to believe that Joe Frazier was at one time the favorite with the odds set at 3.5 to 1. The magic of Frazier's victory over Muhammad Ali clouded the judgment of even the most intelligent boxing analysts. Among American experts, only 4 out of 31 predicted that George Foreman would win. Nothing could convince boxing fans of the inevitable defeat of Smokey Joe. Not the toughest fights, a knockout at the hands of Oscar Bonavena, and the dimensions of his legendary challenger, or even the regulated 8-ounce gloves rarely used in the 70s. Those gloves were much stiffer and harder, and their use was generally prevented in order to protect fighters from serious injuries. This fight against George was Joe's 5th defense of the WBC and WBA belts. Frazier, in Ali's absence, had captured his titles. The decisive moment was the duel with the technical and bold, but too small heavyweight Jimmy Ellis. Joe won, and a year later he defeated Cassius Clay himself, who had changed his name and become Muhammad Ali during a downtime. The duel against Huge Foreman was to become kind of a preparation match for Joe, for an eventual rematch with Ali. The event was organized in Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. Why Jamaica? For one simple reason: tax evasion. The farther into the forest, the more firewood. The U.S. government leveraged heavy fees for events in its territory. This old version of offshore combat had another good reason. The fight was the first ever shown on HBO. If this happened in the United States, the costs of organizing would increase significantly. In addition, such a large-scale event pleased the Jamaican public. There were 36,000 spectators, of whom half were local people. And all of this despite expensive tickets. It is not every day that there is a battle for the title of the strongest boxer in the world, so the spectators felt they could fork out the cash. The government of Jamaica financed the accommodations for the teams of both fighters. The organizers made shrewd calculations. The super fight would fully recoup all expenses and serve as a starting point for showing boxing fights on the now famous HBO. Everything went according to plan. It was only the result of the duel that was shocking. One of the organizers of the mega fight was a young, daring, but not well-known former criminal, Don King. The enterprising man fussed a lot, spoke loudly, and tried in every possible way to attract attention to himself. Before the fight, he was in Frazier's team, and he himself claimed it was thanks to his help that Joe received a good check of $850,000, while George's fee was only $370,000. Foreman was a real knockout machine. He was noticed in 1968. Big George lit up as a sparring partner for Sonny Liston. He fought only 26 times in the amateur ring before gaining victory at the Olympics in Mexico City. Then he transitioned to professional boxing, working with coach Dick Sadler, and he had several spectacular knockouts. However, his victories over Chuck Wepner and George Givallo did not convince boxing experts that George was ready for a title fight. The lack of a long amateur career influenced Foreman's specifications. He acted with excessively sweeping blows and was rude, neglecting his defense. On paper, everything looked beautiful. 2 black, undefeated Americans on a distant island in the Caribbean would determine the best boxer on that fateful day in Kingston, January 22nd, 1973. But in practice, Joe's victory over Ali clouded the minds of boxing fans too much, and many of them did not give George a chance, which he did not forgive them.
Any second now, and we may have an interesting evening. Frazier quite understandably the favorite. Foreman comes out punching with the right. Frazier in his usual style. Smoking is the way he puts it. His job to get inside.
Everything happened very quickly. Even before the battle, Frazier looked a little bewildered against the backdrop of such a huge challenger. In the first round, the champion went ahead and tried to overwhelm Foreman with his famous attacks at the jump. George calmly held the opponent back, checked the distance with a jab, and threw out his terrifying right uppercut. Knockdown.
You may hear him. Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Foreman is as poised as can be in a neutral corner. He is as poised as can be. We have a minute left in this first round.
Frazier made the same mistake, which almost cost him a defeat in the battle with Bonavena. He went on the attack instead of using a clinch, knitting his opponent's hands and trying to recover. George gladly accepted the fight. His right uppercut nearly tore Joe's head off 20 seconds before the end of round 1. It was a second knockdown.
It's all over, Joe Frazier. Frazier is down again, and he doesn't know where he is. Now the round is about to end.
And was quickly followed by another a few seconds before the end of the first round. It was good for Frazier that the rule of 3 knockdowns was canceled a few months before these events. However, that only delayed his defeat.
George Foreman. The stool hasn't even... The slow-mo for the second knockdown. The right again. Clean as a whistle again. We're waiting for the start now. Brown wants to come back in a hurry. You'll not find a gamer man than Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier went down 3 times in the first round. A caution from Arthur Mercani. Oh, he is all over Frazier again. He has Frazier in the corner. Frazier's knees buckled. He is down. He is down for the fellow named Ionis Shapoulis in October of 1968 in the Mexico City Arena. A quick left from George. Another. Frazier is down for the 5th time in this fight. In the second, Mercani checked his senses. Checked Frazier's senses. It's target practice for George Foreman.
At the beginning of the second round, Angelo Dundee, who was the coach for Muhammad Ali, and Joe's mentor, Yancey Durham, appeared ringside and begged for the match to be stopped. Referee Arthur Mercante Sr. stopped the beating and asked Dundee to leave.
It is over. It is over in the second round. George Foreman is the heavyweight.
Meanwhile, Don King, analyzing the situation in a ring, secretly began to move to George's corner. After the fight, Don left the former champion in a swoon and went to reserve a restaurant to celebrate Foreman's victory. King acted quickly as a speculator on the stock exchange. Don felt where the real benefit lies. After 2 days, he was already engaged in negotiations for the first defense of the titles of Big George. It was nothing personal, just business. King always thought and lived as a businessman. He can be loved or hated, but his enormous contribution to the developments of boxing cannot be denied. A young journalist made a name for himself by saying in the media that he had heard how, after Joe's 5th knockdown, Foreman shouted to Yancey Durham, "Stop the fight or I will kill him." But George denied everything. This did not stop the journalists, however. Using slow motion, they found a short dialogue between Yancey and Foreman. This moment once again shows how the reporters make names for themselves by reporting hype. The journalist was in the right time, at the right place. He caught the hype and received some fame, though the quality of his reporting could certainly be discussed. For a whole week, the young journalist was played in sports news no less than a new champion. The guy got what he wanted. And then what happened? The greatest, Muhammad Ali, returned. To begin with, he defeated Frazier and then overthrew Big George, forcing George to think about his life outside the ring for a long year and a half. Foreman returned and had a crazy fight against Ron Lyle. Shortly before this, Joe had lost the Ali trilogy in the famous Thrilla in Manila. Don't feed American spectators with bread. Just let me see some box office revenge. The World Boxing Council, WBC, together with the World Boxing Association, WBA, refused to authorize the second fight of George and Joe as a qualifier for Muhammad's titles. Foreman owned the vacant NABF belt, which he had won the hardest battle against Lyle. In the 21st century, the NABF title has lost its liquidity. But in the 70s, the fighter owning this title was in fact a mandatory contender for the main belts, the WBC and WBA. George longed for revenge against Muhammad. Frazier did not want anything. He said in the media that no matter the outcome, his rematch with Foreman would be the end of his career. But this fact would not prevent him from being 100% ready to take revenge on Foreman for his 6 knockouts in the first fight. The long-awaited revenge took place in New York on June 5, 1976, inside the famous Nassau Veterans Coliseum, made in the likeness of the ancient Coliseum. Joe and George posed for photojournalists in the armor of ancient warriors. It was an analogy of the battle at the Colosseum. Promotion for the event was a success, but the rematch could not be compared with the excitement that was present in their first battle. Even the promotions for the Battle of the Gladiators did not help sell all the tickets. The reason for this boiled down to the fact that the American public knew there was another gladiator who had defeated both of these fighters. Both men received $1 million each. What else had changed since their first meeting? First of all, Joe had shaved his head the day before the fight. The odds of the fighters to win had also changed. They were regarded as equal, despite the total defeat in the first battle. Boxing experts were again too skeptical of Big George. Their opinion was influenced by Foreman's lengthy downtime and his 3 knockouts in the fight with Ron Lyle. Only the results remained the same. Joe had made some changes. He did not immediately throw himself at his huge enemy. Frazier worked competently and even carried out several good attacks, but George's left hook quickly gained him the upper hand.
Foreman is throwing leather. He's got Frazier in Galilee. It's a different kind of fight. There are horses for courses. There are styles for fighters. Then the right. And you saw it. Good left. In the ground. Made of Emil Griffith, also in Foreman's corner. Round 2. Probably his best punch so far. Foreman getting the right in. Frazier against the ropes. This is not a rope-a-dope situation.
In the second round, Frazier got in a great left side. Foreman's legs trembled for a moment. Fans of Smoking Joe began to hope for ultimate success. However, this did not last long. In round 3, George hit so hard with his left that he broke his opponent's orbital bone. Joe fought to the end, but his defeat was inevitable. Frazier began to miss powerful strikes. He looked like an old bull who sees a red cloth, but does not want to run to it.
George has not taken a backward step. Round 3. George Foreman's round again. He hurt Joe Frazier in the ground. That's the end. Frazier pushing off to get punches. That's the end of round 4. Round 5. Let's see if Foreman begins to tie. Frazier. Good right by Foreman. This is not Foreman.
In round 5, Joe made a fatal mistake. He backed away from his opponent in a straight line. George did not forgive that mistake. He hooked this opportunity and set about developing success. Joe nearly flew over the ropes from another left hook. Knockdown. Frazier rose, but again flew away into the corner of his ring. His trainer, Eddie Fuchs, threw out the towel. It was over. 8 falls in an incomplete 7 rounds. The result of the legendary duology of the 2 heavyweights, who were destined to fight in the era of the greatest, Muhammad Ali. Frazier, as promised before the fight, ended his career. He returned to the ring 5 years later and drew a duel against felon boxer Floyd Cummings. After that, Smokey's foot never stepped into the ring again. Foreman won several victories and unexpectedly lost to the technical Jimmy Young. George also retired. He could not achieve revenge against Ali, but he managed to do something else. He returned 10 years later, went from obesity to the status of contender for the world crown, and became the world champion 20 years after his first victory over Joe Frazier. George went down in boxing history as the world's oldest heavyweight champion. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for new episodes about the great legends of the past.